So guys, welcome to Not Another Press Release. We have an array of professionals here around the table today from different departments. So I'd like you all to first introduce yourselves, and then we're going to go into what brings us together and what's going to be the substance of this conversation. So, Giselle, we've worked together a few times, so why don't you start?
Okay, my name is Giselle Carreras, and I'm the head of service for therapy for the care agency. That entails working within the Governor's Parade sort of like setup. And there I work very, very closely with the children and families team and adult sort of like services and disability services. And then ultimately I'm also responsible for the drugs and alcohol rehabilitation service. And that entails a residential program up at Bruce's Farm and a community-based programs for those adults dealing with substance misuse and addictions.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Jackie Linares. I'm the advisor for child welfare in the Department of Education. That encompasses quite a number of areas around child welfare, but one of the main parts of that is safeguarding is one of my main remits. And I work with all 14 government schools and a little bit as well with the private sector, the private schools.
Okay, and finally?
And I'm Michelle. I work for the Gibraltar Sports and Leisure Authority. I'm their sports development, training and inclusion manager. And I'm also part of we have a safeguarding team. And I've been involved with that for many years and involved with these guys through the training subcommittee that we have surrounding safeguarding.
Okay. Well, I think it's very clear what kind of brings us together in this conversation. It's the issue of safeguarding. Maybe we could start by introducing what that means, where this comes from and how it's been introduced into the different government departments. So, Jackie?
Okay, so obviously safeguarding is absolutely core in education. If you think that virtually every single child in Gibraltar will come through our schools. We have currently 6,400 children in the schools on a daily basis. So we will be the section, the department that has that most contact with children on a daily basis. We have over 1,000 members of staff working with children. So safeguarding children is absolutely paramount. And it's vitally important that everybody within our schools has the knowledge and understanding of what their role is in terms of the protection of children. So we work really hard to ensure that everybody has access to training, that we have policies and procedures in place, that we have open discussions. I'm available pretty much all the time for any questions or queries, and we have really, really good collaboration and cooperation with care agency, with the police. Those are our main people, but we also work quite closely with GSLA, youth, culture, and the GHA.
Okay. What about within the care agency and the GSLA? And also, when did safeguarding become a term sort of that was popularized and used often and that people had a sensibility towards?
Okay, first of all, in terms of the work that we do within the care agency, obviously safeguarding is at the sort of like the core of it all. Now, in terms of sort of like developing into sort of like the psychoeducation of that and delivering that out into the community with the sister agencies, I believe that the notion of the training was actually formalized in Gibraltar pre-2010, if I recall correctly, but it had even been slightly before. Previously it had sort of like taken place in Gibraltar, but very, very fragmented. So in the sense that the care agency would undertake its own safeguarding training to staff or sort of like key stakeholders, education was undertaking their own, the sports and youth are undertaking their own. Now, with the publication of Every Child Matters in the UK, I believe that this sadly all came together. And the notion was that
There was a report in 2010, yes?
No, this was like the production of Every Child Matters, within the UK.
I imagine that was a report produced by some kind of UK public authority.
It was based on a serious case review. They had an absolutely horrendous case of a young girl being found, dead in a bathtub in a black bin liner, ankles and wrists bound, being made to eat off a plastic lid. Her name was Victoria, and the report was done because there were literally hundreds of people who were in professional positions to try and protect children that had not managed to save her the torture that she had been through for the last year and a half of her life. So the report Every Child Matters came about because of that, and I think we've all, I think we all use that. I mean, I know it.
Yes, that's a fundamental part of the actual safeguarding training, and because of that, sort of like everything was like almost formalized, and the notion was that no one agency, no one organization could do this on their own. If we go to the case itself of Victoria Climbié, and if you actually do look at the actual serious case review that was undertaken by Lord Laming at the time, the amount of professionals involved, but in silos, was extremely significant. There were hospitals involved, there was education, there were social workers, there were charities, there were youth services involved, but yet
no structure,
nobody. And we also then go to what we continue to develop and stress within our training, that we each may hold a part of the jigsaw puzzle, but that it needs to be together.
Yeah.
And this is why the notion of sort of like working together and promoting this level of training and education within safeguarding is so important.
So that the layperson understands that we're talking about everything that we do in a very structured, sort of systematic way protect children from predatory behaviors, to protect people with vulnerabilities, to make sure that there's oversight between different departments, and that what happened in that case simply cannot happen again.
Yeah, right? I think that one of the key messages we put out within the training and to all our staff is that you could hold a piece of the jigsaw to share that information with the relevant and appropriate people within your association and outside of your association. But also to remember that ultimately what we don't want to happen is to have a child pass away, to die. And we are quite hard-hitting at the beginning of the safeguarding training when we look at why do we safeguard. That is ultimately what we're doing in protecting children. So our message is very clear, and that we must pass that information on. We must share that information, but that you are not alone when you deal with this information. And that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, not just professionals, but everybody in our community has a responsibility to safeguard children.
And in what way can people engage to help protect vulnerable people and children? When you say it's everybody's responsibility, what kind of behaviours do you want to see?
Yeah. So basically, when we do, for example, when I train people in education, we train not only teachers, we train the SLSAs, we train the lunch ladies, we train the secretaries, we train the cleaners, the caretakers, so the lab technicians. So they all understand that it's not just up to the teacher to notice. If they notice something, that they have a role and what their role is within that. So that's one way that we try and get that message out. And also that it doesn't just happen when you're in your workplace. If you notice anything outside of your workplace, that you have a duty to pass that on.
And what kind of things are we talking about? Noticing? What would they be noticing?
Yeah, so we talk about, for example, quite often one of the things we talk about in the training is babies. And obviously teachers go, but we don't teach babies. And we say, yeah, but you still, if you notice anything or something is spoken about which indicates that a baby is in danger, just because that baby is not a baby you have contact with, you still have the duty to pass that on. So that's in one way that we advocate that they do that. But also, I think that the care agency also run sessions monthly. So we do a lot of our in-house training, and we have extended it and bespoke it to many different roles. But the care agency run a monthly session which is free of charge.
Yes.
Anybody can attend.
We've been doing this from, we wouldn't, I don't have the statistics on us, but if we go back to this being formalized around or prior to 2010, we're talking about thousands of people who have been trained especially within the tier 1 safeguarding. And again, going back to what happened with Every Child, the publication of Every Child Matters, that set up, and rolled out the need to establish the concept of an infrastructure between organizations to ensure that we all worked together at the best of our ability to safeguard children and young people. And within that, then that led on to the CPC, the Child Protection Committee, being established. With the Child Protection Committee, we then have different subgroups. We all sit in the subgroup of training, and the purpose and the objective of such training, it all equates to creating more awareness within safeguarding, It is not just the tier 1 and the tier 2 training that is delivered. I mean, as organizations, and because of sort of like this notion and the importance to safeguard and to minimize risk, and then the importance of early prevention work and early detection, we have all as organizations also established additional programs, which looks at different themes in safeguarding. So, for example, the care agency, aside from this specific sort of like tailor-made safeguarding pathways, and so people really understand what is abuse, what is sexual abuse, what is physical abuse, what is neglect. People need to understand that, because not everybody may understand, what those definitions are. When is a child at risk? When do they need to report? What do they need to observe? Who do they report to? What are the pathways? And all this is covered within the tier 1 safeguarding training. But going back to what I was saying before, as a result of the importance of safeguarding, the care agency, for example, identified key themes, and we have developed even additional programs. So, for example, we offer what is the Freedom Project, we offer the Voice, we offer the Moving On, and that looks at all that is happening within the realms of domestic abuse, which also impacts on children. We then equally offer programs for young people, which we call the LOL program, which looks at healthy relationships, which looks at the implications of those children suffering from abuse and neglect. We also offer and do that fundamental work with those perpetrators of abuse in seeking to minimize risk, which comes under the perpetrator programs, such as the Respect program. And then we have like the DART program, which again looks at safeguarding, where you have young people, who are in very high conflict relationships with their carers or their parents. So it's an array of things. I mean, education, for example, again, does another array of different programs.
Yeah, so we've developed.
I wanted to ask Michelle, because right now the summer sports program starts, and a vast amount of young people and children in Gibraltar attend that. In fact, we had the GSLA round for the last podcast we filmed, and they were trying to make it clear that this isn't necessarily a creche service. Yeah, because a lot of people use it a bit like a creche. It's a program to sort of incentivize kids to do sports, and they want to give it a slightly different. I think at this stage, it'd be interesting to talk about the safeguarding from the perspective of the GSLA before this program starts, so people understand all the work that's put into making sure that kids are going to be safe.
Okay. So we do a generic training program that's very big. In fact, I've just come from it now. It runs for 8 days. It's about a 40-hour training program. And one of the statutory modules is that everybody has to come on board and do a safeguarding module. And just for information, if we look through that and just building on what Giselle's just said, it splits into four main aims. And the first one for us is looking at good practice in sport. And we do a lot of training around that separate to the actual safeguarding. But it's about things like favouritism and how people come away from feeling that. It's about putting on programmes that are too hard for the developing nature of the child. So quite a bit of the beginning of our programme is based around things like that, which is good practice. But then we kind of move on, because the other thing that we have is not everybody perceives and safeguarding. Somebody might think actually it's okay to shout at a child, and some people might think that it's not. Some people might think that it's okay to move a child into a position. We don't advocate that. But then there are certain types of sports where it is very easy to kind of, for example, shooting, you might be here and you might need to move to here. But it's about always asking the child, do you mind if I help you? And it's about looking at those things that could constitute making children feel uncomfortable. And then a big part of what we do is signs and symptoms. You asked a question earlier on. So we do a big section on signs and symptoms, and we split that down into 5 sections. We have physical abuse, we have emotional abuse, we have neglect, and we have sexual abuse. And we also have bullying as well. So we work with them, and we always try with our training to be very interactive, because the last thing that we want to do, our training is all free of charge, and people either come along for a full day or with us they come along for a minimum 3 or 4 hours, 3.5 hours, and very often with us it's after they've been at work or in school for a full day. So the last thing we want anybody to do is fall asleep and switch off halfway through what we're doing, because we think this is so important that they understand. So we have very interactive workshops where we get people working together to come up with all kinds of different, and we say it's physical signs of things you can see and behavioural symptoms that are very often things that you can't see. And we work on those and getting those young people to try and identify those, because it's there, any of us or any of our teachers or our coaches or our volunteers with that, you get that gut feeling that isn't quite right sometimes. You know, we need them to be able to identify that. And we use the care agency tier 1 material for big parts of our training course. And so we look at that, and because we think it's really important that they understand that. And then the next section that we do is what action do you take if because actually one of the biggest things is people aren't sure what to do.
Exactly.
So we talked about what action would you take, and we ask everybody to make a commitment right at the beginning that after you've been on this course today, if you have a gut feeling that something isn't right, even if it's a small part of that jigsaw, we pass that on to a professional. We're not professionals, we're sports coaches, we're volunteers, and many of our people are between the ages of 16 and 18 and are working with, you know, younger children. So a big part of that action is taking action and making sure that we can give that information to the professionals, to the care agency, to the RGP. If you're not sure, to talk to Childline. And if parents aren't involved, obviously they need to know very quickly. So that's kind of what we do in our training. A little bit different with the summer, because with the summer we can say you always come to your deputies or you always come to us. We discussed it. But when we're out in the community when we deliver these, because we also deliver them monthly, you know, every association that is registered with us, this is apart from the summer now, in order to be registered and recognised, they have to have a safeguarding policy. That safeguarding policy, we don't want a 25-page document. We want an A4 page that if somebody's got a concern, they know where to go to. Mm-hmm. You know,
and what to do.
Yeah. I think you have to
and
say
what the pathway is, yes.
Yeah, and always we try and encourage, we are not professionals. It's not for anybody in the community, because you're asking about everybody has different roles. Everybody has different roles. None are more important or less important than anything else. Yeah. But our role is to recognise, and if you've got something that you feel uncomfortable, it's not your role to decide whether somebody is being abused, but it's your role to pass on to a professional so that they can look into it. So that's the kind of training that we do, not just around the summer, but it's absolutely statutory. In fact, we're on tomorrow morning again for the 13 people that missed our initial training a few weeks ago. Can't come and work with us with that, because it's really important that we see that. And we have seen it, and we have made referrals, and it has worked to keep children safer. And I think everything that we're doing in safeguarding, and I think the infrastructure was really important after that Every Child Matters.
Yes.
Because it made us come and sit round a table and look at the way that we could develop an infrastructure that got that message out there.
And we've been very fortunate as well. I mean, I think it's important to mention that getting round that table, getting that infrastructure, getting that sort of like training package developed, and our director for standards and safety and services, I mean, Angelo, one of the things that he did was he actually got in contact through a child protection conference which they attended with Professor Shemmings, and this is a very, very highly sort of like acknowledged and learned professional specific to safeguarding children, highly published, and he actually validated the tier 1 safeguarding. He actually supported Gibraltar, you know, to actually develop and fine tweak. So we have we have his sort of like material, which we then equally have adapted certain parts of it for the local community. Okay. And that is the level and the caliber of the training that is out there, that is offered.
Yeah, the training actually is very localized. So along with making sure all the main areas are covered, and which, as you pointed out, Professor Shemmings has validated. We also personalise it to Gibraltar, and I think that's really important. So we do have a lot of people coming saying, I've done my safeguarding training online, so on and so forth, but we very much advocate that they do the local training, because it does get professionals together to talk about the local context and look at how Gibraltar safeguards and what are the things that are very pertinent and very particular to Gibraltar.
And the importance of having those conversations when you're actually sort of like engaged in the actual training and working with other professionals, your professional curiosity comes out. Those professional discussions are taken to a different heightened level, which then sort of like meets even the added objective of really understanding the importance and the value of training such as this.
And engaging the professionals.
Absolutely.
And making... And what are the sort of peculiarities of Gibraltar in that sense? What is different in our training and why?
Yeah, so if in particular in education, obviously break the training down. So we do things for different roles. So for the SNLSA role, which would sort of match a TA in UK, for caretakers, full-time cleaners, so on and so forth, we all bespoke the training to their role, but we also will talk about things like the proximity of each of us to children that we know for very personal reasons. So, if you have a concern about a child, that could be your neighbour, your cousin's child, the father, the mother, what do we do about that? So
and we actually, sorry for interrupting, and to actually sort of like look precisely at that and at the importance of that because of the uniqueness of our community, we even included specific exercises that looks at what may stop a professional from reporting, what may stop someone in the community, the neighbour, from reporting, and for people to really, really come to terms with the importance that as adults we have a duty of care.
And it's about, we talk about how the child must be at the centre all the time. And when you are coming to have to make a very, very difficult decision about whether to pass that information on, you just have that child at the centre. It doesn't matter about your relationship with that parent. And as we well know, anybody could be a perpetrator. We cannot presume. So who is the most important in this? The child. The child is at the centre. And if there's any sign that that child could be in danger, we have to follow through. And I think we very much talk about how also if there is an accusation which is not correct, that also needs to be dealt with, and that by burying that, you're not going to achieve anything. So we really advocate, keep the child at the centre. The child is the most important person here. So it doesn't matter whether you know the father, the mother, the cousin, whatever, if you have a concern. But there are some very difficult conversations that have to be had at times. And it can be very difficult. So boundaries and being within an area where you are going to keep seeing perhaps a parent or somebody that you maybe flagged a concern up against. But people are very grateful in the end, because most of our work is about helping and supporting families. So the safeguarding training is not just about protecting children from abusers, but also to make people realise that it's getting that early work in and supporting and helping families. So you get a lot of gratitude as well that you've been brave enough to take that step.
But it's also, I wanted to ask one thing, because you mentioned how there's obviously on YouTube, there's a protection element, so sort of detecting and reporting anything that you might see there's a little bit off. But then there's a part of sort of projecting the kind of relationship we want to have with the child as an institution, that is respectful, that deals with the physicality of things in a particular way, that deals with the needs of different children in different ways, and that in a way is we're almost projecting a way of almost parenting, of educating, of engaging with children, and in that sense, I guess every parent has their own idea of how that needs to be done, and sometimes these can be different to the ones that we have. How does that come out? What is the response? What kind of responses do you get from parents to these things?
It can be mixed. And like I say, sometimes it can be a very difficult conversation at the beginning, and perhaps a parent can be upset or let's take something badly. But very often, and more often than not, the parents are very grateful for the help and support. And everything we do when we're working with parents is done in a non-judgmental way. And one of the other things we very much advocate in training is keep an open mind. Don't presume anything. Keep everything factual and pass everything factual on. Don't assume. And if you do that and you're non-judgmental, parents normally realise that we're there to help and support them and to make sure ultimately the child is safe.
Because I remember growing up in the 80s, there'd be like parents that would come to school and talk to teachers, and like if he misbehaves, just like hit them and whack them. And that was one of those things that you would hear all the time. Is that, you still hear those kinds of things sometimes? Is that like...
Not as much. Sometimes we have to have difficult conversations with parents.
But I think that's the key. I think that's the key theme. I think it's the notion, and I use that phrase a lot. It's about having those difficult conversations, And sometimes it's about that because of an individual's own upbringing, own sort of like value system, own sort of like experiences, not that I'm justifying any behavior, because I wouldn't be able to do that, but I can understand where they may be coming from. So subsequently, that particular parent, for example, may need that extra support, that extra sort of like level of sensitive, what we call psychoeducation, to understand that there are different ways.
Of course.
You know,
and they can take your courses too, no? Because everybody can go to these courses, no?
Being parents, I mean, many parents have attended courses as well, but in terms of sort of like early work and early help, again, we offer, in connection with schools, in connection with therapeutic teams, in connection with social work colleagues, you know, an array of programs whereby they will attend different things and receive specific one-to-one sessions. Maybe that involves attending the family center for sort of like parenting, early prevention work and support, to then reach the ultimate goal, which is always about, you know, keeping the child focused, and that child is able to lead the best life, you know, that every child deserves.
Yeah, there's so many ramifications. I think we're really lucky in Gibraltar as well, because we have a lot of charities and NGOs who are also very on board with the well-being of children. So we're really fortunate, and we all work together really, really well. I mean, Childline run the DART program, which is an amazing program to support victims of domestic abuse. And the parent actually attends with a child, so that they can rebuild their relationship. And it's not the perpetrator, as in the parent, but perhaps the other parent, if that's that particular scenario, and they work together on rebuilding the relationship, understanding what happened, looking at perhaps why the child didn't feel they were protected. So some really important work, and that's just one example of an NGO who works really, really closely with us in terms of safeguarding children. They do a lot of work on keeping children themselves, keeping themselves safe, understanding that there are parts of your body that you should not be allowing anybody to touch. So we have Pantosaurus. So Childline bring Pantosaurus into school to talk about that. The new guidance as well on RSHE, which is becoming statutory in UK in September this year. We've been working in that in schools over this past year, and a lot of the PSHE curriculum is very much working on children, empowering children to keep themselves safe as well. So that it's not just about adults, but it's about children understanding and having the knowledge and having the understanding, having the vocabulary in order to keep themselves safe and to be able to speak out when something is not right. And that's a really big thing running through the new RSHE guidance. And we've been working, like I say, working on that and bringing that in through schools. So it's an extra ramification in keeping children safe, is empowering children to keep themselves safe and understanding when something is not right. I mean, exploitation by sexual exploitation with children, other forms of exploitation with teenagers is not an uncommon thing. And sometimes the problem is that teenagers are very vulnerable. And people don't realize actually it's a time of their life when we expect so much from them. We expect that responsibility, that independence, and yet there's so much going on in their lives. And actually one of the main things that's happening is the changes in the brain. And their ability to reason, their ability to be logical, actually changes. And so we need to educate children to understand that. And they get involved perhaps with people who are looking for vulnerable children. So you add in puberty with a child who's experienced trauma, and their risk factors are even higher. So that work throughout, and especially up into the secondary, to help children understand how to keep themselves safe, to understand what consent is, to understand what boundaries are, to be able to reflect, to know where to go for help. That all needs to be done so that children also know how to keep themselves safe. And one of our things that we've done as well is developed safeguarding training for under 18s, so that children going into, or young people going into work with children, also have their own safeguarding training. So we do them separately, because there are conversations which can be had at their level, at the level of a 17, 16-year-old. So Possibilities do training for under 18s. We've done it with Nautilus. So many of those people attend a bespoke version of the Tier 1 that I've set up, and now I do an enrichment program as well with college, which is a 6-week program for any young person who's thinking of going into a career where they'd be working with children. So there's so many ramifications, so many ways that we're reaching out to make sure children are safeguarded. And we just try and exploit every single area we can in order to keep children safe.
I mean, and I think the most important thing is that we work very closely together.
Yeah.
You know, and we listen to each other. You know, and we support each other. knowing only yesterday, even if for things automatically the three of us sat down, we met, the three of us are equally busy, but we note the importance of something like this, and sort of like reaching out again to the community to remind them that this type of sort of like training, for example, in psychoeducation and safeguarding is available.
I think that I come out of this conversation with three clear takeaways. No, on the one hand, I think that everybody who's has an interest in children and understands their responsibility should consider doing these courses, which are open to the public, and I think are going to be very valuable, and they're going to sort of enrich their relationship with the children in their life. To understand their role in the picture of keeping an eye open, listening, and trying to notice anything that should be reported. And thirdly, something we haven't discussed, but I have had conversations about different people in the department about, as parents, as carers, making sure that we always leave our children in places where we know they're going to be well taken care of. Yeah. That the people who are going to, the carers of our children, the minders of our children, the people, the camps, the courses, the trainings that we take our children to have the adequate training, and that we also have a role to ensuring that.
Yes.
No?
Absolutely. Within the CPC, we've had those discussions about encouraging parents to ask the question.
Absolutely.
And it's been very much advocated, especially by Christian Rocker. He's been very much saying we need to make sure that parents ask that question. Again, it's just exploiting every single avenue we can to ensure that children are kept safe. So that is another area that's been very much spoken about, and about how we do carry on reaching out to parents. I mean, we cover a lot of the community. Michelle covers so many people through the sports program, ourselves through education, care agency, and the children themselves. But absolutely, just keep that message going out there, that parents need to ask the question about the safety of their children.
And do they come and ask you, for example, Michelle, do they say, listen, you guys have the right kind of safeguarding training because I'm worried about my kids?
We make sure that everybody knows that everybody working on our programs is safeguarding trained, but that's only one part of our program.
Yes.
So we've got a few different programs. So the other one is that we work in, and it's not just sports associations, it's leisure associations as well. And we now have charities coming to us that are working with children and young people. So we would not advertise anybody that didn't have that training. For instance, we've got the book online now. We've got a photography workshop. All those guys came on a training course earlier this year. We have arts programs, the same thing, they come on. Some of them will come in and say, we've done it online, and we strongly recommend that they come and do it with us, because the biggest part of the training program at the end is what action do you take? And that's where we need to link it into the local infrastructure.
So people know exactly what they need to do and where they need to go.
So, and the other thing is, when we talk to people out there in the community, because some people in charities actually don't realise, they see the Gibraltar Sports and Leisure Authority and they think it's just for Sport and Leisure Association, so they don't know. But we say, no, we will never turn anybody away from any of our training courses if they are involved in an organisation that provides activities or a service for children and young people under the age of 18 years. So that's how we're trying to work. And one of the big things that we say on all of our courses is this is not just about sport and leisure. This is about everyday life. All of us have to work together, if we have a jigsaw. It's that uncomfortable feeling that you have, and we need to pass that on to a professional. And we're just hoping that we can get more and more people, indeed everybody is our aim, isn't it, that is working with children and young people, but they have people leaving and moving on and everything else. And that also, they are police vetted when they are here. We have more and more people coming that we maybe don't have, and we need to make sure that they are police vetted, safeguarding trained and qualified. And that's what we're aiming towards. And
I think it's also important, we were talking about this earlier, I think that even though we do invest a lot of resources and time and care and concern to make sure that people are trained and that our children are taken care of, these things continue to happen, even in the places where people have training. Like, it isn't just about the safeguarding, it's about everything around. And I'm sure that if we get to a place where every single actor within society understands their role, it will be very difficult for abuses to happen.
Yes, absolutely.
But even in very developed places with very sort of effective, functional public services, etc., abuses continue to happen, right?
Absolutely.
And there's no way on earth that anybody, any one professional, any group of professionals could preempt that or a particular individual is set or will be sort of like harming a child. What we can do is ensure that we have all the safeguards that we can in place, which I believe that as organizations we do have. What we can ensure is that we continue sort of like forwarding to our community, and to staff working within organizations and working specifically with children, that this information is readily available and understood, and keep sort of like moving forward, with the same objective.
Yeah, and be vigilant, I think. So just continue to be vigilant. And even if you have flagged something up, another one of our core themes is our professional persistence. Even if you have flagged something up, and you have to flag it up again and again and again, you do. And if you feel that it hasn't been dealt with, I will tell teachers, I will tell everybody that I train, if you feel that your line manager hasn't dealt with something, you go over their head. And you make sure that information gets to where it needs to get to. It very rarely happens. I have to say I am really, really proud of our senior leadership teams in school. They are very, very on it when it comes to safeguarding. We are constantly on the phone having discussions about different areas because it's not black and white. Safeguarding has a lot of grey areas, and we have constant conversations and discussions about what we need to do in order to make things better. We analyse our training, we make it more interactive, we analyse whether people are taking on board the messages, just like we do with any lesson that we would give. Is the learning happening? But I am really proud of the senior leadership teams and the safeguarding leads we have in schools, because I think they're really, really passionate and very keen to keep learning.
And what also happens is we have the CPC, we've mentioned it, the head of every single public service department has to sit on the CPC. It's a statutory requirement. So we sit on a training committee, and I think it's even more than that. Every time we run a safeguarding course, maybe a new issue comes up, like you said, it still happens. We are working to make it safer tomorrow than we are today. That is our aim.
Yes.
Yeah.
But every time something comes up, there's somebody who will stay behind and have a conversation with you. And as and when the issues come up, we discuss them and we try and deal with them. But we pass them on to our line managers, who then take them to CPC, because they're in a better position to action and to support us to action to keep children safer. And I think that's all any of us can do, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is good and bad. Yeah. And we just are working as hard as we can to keep our children as safe as we can.
I think one of the things in terms of keeping, making the future better is that it doesn't just end once something has been referred and, perhaps a care agency are involved. There may be a child who has now been impacted by trauma. Yeah. They may have parents who have also suffered or have experienced ACEs throughout their lives. So one of the other pieces of work, or lots of pieces of work that we do, is about breaking the cycle of adversity so that this doesn't become generational, that it isn't passed on from one generation to the next. Because if you've got one child who maybe is abused or two children in the family, they go on to have more children. It's exponential. So we have to do work on helping young people and helping families overcome trauma and moving on, so that it's not just it doesn't keep being replicated. And that means we need a trauma-informed society. We need to deal with everybody in a trauma-informed way, with understanding and kindness, even those parents. And sometimes, we sometimes can have parents who are very stressed, are very anxious, and they come across as very difficult and very challenging. But some of them have experienced very difficult lives, and we have to deal with them with kindness and understanding. And we have to deal with children with kindness, compassion, and understanding, even when they're being challenging, even when they're perhaps being aggressive or violent. Trauma stays in the body, and it takes a very long time to undo that. So a child who maybe has experienced domestic abuse for 6 or 7 years of their life is even if they're in a safe place after that doesn't go away overnight. We have to have extreme patience, understanding, and compassion.
Interventions to be able to overcome that. And that is actually very, very focal to the work that the care agency does. It's about understanding about that, about trauma-informed practice, and it's about working within that approach. Okay. Because only within working with that approach can we make a difference to keep our children safer.
And we stop it replicating into the next generation.
And finally, if we have someone who's listening to this podcast who would like to report something and who maybe feels a little bit intimidated with about the idea of going to the police about it, do we have different avenues? Do we have ways in which people can speak in a slightly more comfortable setting, less imposing setting?
You can report to the police online. There is various places you can report online, and if you don't want to be known, you don't have to be known. You can call Childline. You can call the care agency directly, and you can be anonymous. It's much easier. We always encourage professionals to own their information, because it's very difficult to follow something up when you don't really know where the information's come from. But we always say the worst thing is not to pass that information on. But obviously, when you've got people in the community and they don't want to be known, they can call the police, they can call the control room, they can go online, they can go to Childline, they can call the care agency directly, as long as they pass on that information.
Yes, and there's direct emails to the care agency and referral concerns for a child. All that action and all that information is placed within sort of like the training as well. But people can call directly to care agency.
A lot of people go through the schools. They will tell a head teacher. A lot of people call me, and even though I'm not supposed to be a point of reference for referrals, any information that's given to me, I will pass on. But they feel, perhaps because they've got a relationship with the school, they feel they're able to go in and talk to the head teacher and say, I've got this concern. It might not be anything to do with school, but it might be a concern about a neighbour. It could be anything. So they have quite a lot of places that they can go safely and pass on the information. And yes, like we say, it could be something, it could be nothing. But let's hope that it's nothing and the information is passed on, not that it's something and the information is not passed on. That's what we want. And everybody does their best to protect everybody who becomes involved.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, guys. I mean, this is a fascinating topic of conversation. We could talk about this for a long, long time. But I think that we, given a lot of information out there, a lot of useful messages. We encourage people to listen, to action, to be vigilant, to report things, to train, to understand what their role is in society. And we thank you very much for your time and for all your stories and your expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.